Hi everybody, welcome back to the PTC podcast. New year 2024. This will be our first one out. I'm here with Richard. How you doing, Richard?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Yeah, good.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no worries. Pleasure. We're just going to have a little chat, maybe help out people with some goal setting. I put a thing on my story the other day saying people to type in their New Year's resolutions.
Okay.
I got zero input. Zero. One person wrote hi. So that tells me that either people are afraid of putting their name to a goal, or they're afraid they're maybe they're just not interested in talking to me about it. I don't know. But
I think it also might be that like everything on social media right now is about goal setting and is about new year, new me and all that. So I'm sure people are also a bit tired of it very quickly, you know.
Maybe. Well, let's hope that they've got one more ounce of listening in them, because we're going to talk about it. You're going to give some advice on it. It also could be that people just didn't want to talk to me, which is also highly likely a couple of days after New Year's Eve. So, you are... how would you introduce yourself?
So I think coach, psychologist, business psychologist and coach, something along those lines.
Yeah, business psychologist and coach. Cool.
Yeah.
So what is it in the business world that you... business psychology?
So I think my undergrad and my interest came from psychology, came from actual kind of a therapeutic background. But I think as I got through it, I think, you know, there's I don't know if you've heard it, there's a phrase where it's easier to make good children than it is to fix broken adults.
Right.
I think sometimes that's quite idealistic to think that we're going to get all of the kind of the teachings and the learnings and all these things into schools and get them also that by the time people get to adulthood they have all the tools they need. I think that's maybe a little bit unrealistic. So maybe I was thinking that there are so many people who struggle with what, you know, you could argue is quite basics, that we aren't taught emotional intelligence, we aren't taught resilience in school. So although it would be great to get into schools and get those things into children, in reality, a lot of the time people make it to adulthood without learning these tools. So I think the business side of things is going into people and saying, how can you become the best version of yourself? How can you deal with the things that you're coming up against without having to go back to, you know, my dad didn't hug me enough or my parents were too tough on me, because I think that can be quite overwhelming for people to approach.
What if that is the problem?
If that is the problem, then it's therapy.
Right.
It's therapy. You know, I'm not a therapist. I'm not qualified as a counselor. I'm a psychologist. So if someone comes to me and they have suffered big T trauma, if you've ever heard of that before, so it's genuine psychological trauma or physical trauma, that's not what I deal with. I'm not dealing with anything that is diagnosable or anything like that. So if it's, you know, clinical depression or generalized anxiety disorder or anything like that, that's not really what I'm interested in. What I'm interested in is trying to get people happy, number one, and competent in dealing with what they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, whether that be professional or their personal life.
So what's big T trauma then? What's your boundary line? Where do you go, oh shit?
So that, again, that would be something that a specialist would have to speak about.
Yeah.
But big T trauma is just a differentiation where things like, you know, pop psychology, traumas become a thing where people say, I'm traumatized by
microaggressions.
Yeah, or that is a genuine thing. People have to deal with that on a day-to-day basis.
Is that a big T or little T? Or is it a micro T?
It depends on the person. It depends on the person. But I would say big T traumas are things when, if I say think of someone who you would consider traumatized, there would be things where it's childhood abuse, poverty is a big one. War, yeah. The genuine things that are studied and that there are actual protocols in place to deal with those things where you need genuine professional intervention. Whereas I think little T's are, you know, things like a toxic work environment, those things that, yes, they can be very detrimental, or something like, you know, narcissism is a big thing that you see online nowadays. Narcissism is something that's actually diagnosable. It's an actual condition. Being gaslit or being manipulated or being treated poorly doesn't necessarily mean the person is a narcissist, but there are ways that you can deal with someone who shows narcissistic tendencies.
So to your best effort, what's the definition of gaslit? Because that's a new word that's popped up in the last 5 years, and it's a thing that I think people go through without realizing what it is. But like you hear it being thrown around in arguments, you know, don't gaslight me, or you are gaslighting me. But like, what is it exactly?
So I think the best way to think about it in kind of layman's terms is that the actual act of gaslighting is when someone has the intention of actually doing that. So things like being undermined in an argument, or being made to, when people say, it's a very kind of stereotypical example, but if you get in an argument and you say something and the other person says, or you say something like, you're acting crazy, and the other person says, don't call me crazy, and you say, oh, I'm not calling you crazy, I'm saying you're acting crazy. That's not gaslighting, but it's you're doing that. You might not necessarily be doing that to rile the person up. Whereas I think it's just something that happens where the person is made to feel like the other person is actively trying to undermine them or make them feel as if their thoughts and their behaviors are not what they think they're putting across. I think the actual act of gaslighting itself is wanting to actually undermine that person, make them feel insecure, make them feel as if what they're trying to put across isn't being received by the other person.
Because where I have come across it is, if you have wronged me, and I am raising the issue at you that you have wronged me, you turn around and tell me that I am wrong for thinking that you are wrong.
Yeah.
And then you throw out at me, you are acting crazy. Why are you overreacting?
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm not overreacting.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I'm on the back foot, and I'm trying to dig my way out of it. Wait, this is a thing that you did by conventional standards. You wronged me, you betrayed me, you lied to me, you didn't show up on time, whatever. But then you get it flipped on you. That's my understanding of it. Is that a different thing, or is that close to gaslighting?
No, I think that's along the right line. So I think one thing to be aware of when it comes to gaslighting is, so if you take,
is it an actual thing, or is it?
Yeah.
So it's not just like this cultural little thing that's squiggled its way through.
Well, it's just that kind of pop psychology thing where if you how many times have you seen people talking about dopamine on Instagram? It's the same thing where just something is kind of taken, it's distilled to a point where people can understand it on a basic level, and then it just becomes a black and white thing where people take that because there's nuance in everything. People take that black and white definition and a very basic kind of surface level understanding, and then they apply it to situations where they might not necessarily be there.
Right.
So I think what's good to keep in mind is that if you take your situation or your example, if the person who you are reacting to is doing it in order to get a reaction out of you, that would be closer to gaslighting. So what's important to remember is that, it's called spotlight thinking, where you always think that because you are kind of the main character in your own story, that everyone is living their life in relation to your story. Whereas the actual fact is the person who is making you react to something, they're the main character of their story. So they not be thinking about you when they behave in a certain way or when they make a certain decision. So your reaction might be thinking, your basis might be, how could they behave that way when they know that it makes me crazy, or they know that I'm going to react a certain way based on what they're doing, or they're doing something we haven't agreed to do. Whereas what they're actually doing is just living out their circumstance, their context. They might not be thinking about you at all. Then when you react, their genuine response is, why are you reacting like that? Because they have thought it through in their head and they haven't explained it to you, or they're just reacting kind of off the cuff. So I think that the difference is if the person did something to get a reaction out of you, so they could turn around and go, why are you overreacting? Why are you acting crazy? That would be closer to gaslighting than just someone who makes you crazy.
Genuinely a psycho.
Yeah.
So how would this happen in a work environment? Like, do you deal with that at all commonly in work?
Yeah. So I think a kind of generic example would be someone who has, I had a client recently who had a boss who, I mean, by all intents and purposes is one of the worst examples of a boss I've ever come across. They are aggressive, they belittle people in front of colleagues, they will dress someone down for a very small mistake, and then when that same person makes a much bigger mistake, won't react in the same way. I heard an example where they went out to a business lunch. They were hosted by another company. The company had agreed with the restaurant to put on like a business lunch kind of thing. Everyone gets, a couple of options. There's a set price. He refused to stick to that. He took the a la carte menu, to the point where the company actually had to get special dispensation to pay for the lunch because he had racked up champagne and all of the lobster dinners. They went to a meeting in London, and when he said, this is my favorite place, we have to go here for lunch. They got there, his favorite table wasn't available. He made 8 colleagues wait an hour so that he could sit in one seat in one of the busiest, restaurants in central London. So and he is a very high position. He's a C-suite position. So there are very few people who can, you know, cut him down for these kind of behaviors, who can keep him in check. And so that, you know, that could be a good example where you're constantly in, you know, another thing that's kind of quite popular in pop culture is fight or flight. You know, you could be in this situation where you're on tenterhooks, you're on eggshells the whole time, so you don't know if I've done this in the past and he's reacted this way, but I've also made a bigger mistake and he's reacted a different way. So you never know the reaction you're going to get from them. If he is doing this consciously, then that could be an example of gaslighting, where his goal is to keep people on edge, so they're constantly anxious, they're constantly worried about his reaction, so they don't know what way to behave. You're constantly pushing yourself to the limit, doing things that you wouldn't ordinarily do, and also making mistakes you wouldn't ordinarily do if you were calm and if you felt safe and secure in your position. So it's a very, very difficult thing to deal with, because it also, for it to be gaslighting, it has to be an actual active behavior in the person where they're doing this in order to get a negative response out of you.
Okay, good. Very interesting. I didn't really look at it that way. I never understood that aspect of the intent behind it, that the intent has to be there. Because I've had people in conversation. This is going back to when COVID was a thing and the vaccines were coming out, and we're trying to have those conversations. And it's all new, and everyone's anxiety is racked up. And I was having a conversation with one girl, and it was a case of, like, I would almost say it wasn't an argument, but she wasn't fully formed in what she was saying, and I was slowly highlighting that to her in a roundabout way. And she just goes, "Why are you gaslighting me?"
Yeah.
And I didn't know what to say, because I didn't know what that, I'd heard that word.
Yeah.
But I was like, am I? I don't even know if I am. I'm like, this is not okay. Anyway, okay, let's not talk about this anymore. And I just was like, that was such a, I don't know if she was right. I don't know if as by saying that I was gaslighting her. I don't know if it was just her way of throwing a word at me to get me to gaslight me.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think a lot of people.
Was she gaslighting me by accusing me of gaslighting her?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's like 4D chess. You know, she's got you in the corner. She's no, you know. I think a lot of people have taken it on as a defense mechanism or as an excuse to be able to get away with more, or like you said, to not have to think through your argument. Because, you know, if you ever have an argument with someone, if they tell you their side and then you tell them your side, if your side is more well thought out, how many times have you got, you know, in the pub or a colleague, whatever it is, and they just kind of go, shut up, or and they just cut the conversation. Yeah. Or they get personal and they attack you, you know. It's that kind of defense mechanism where she might be realizing, I haven't thought this through, crap, this person has a better argument than I do. So I'm just going to put up a wall that it's put you on the back foot where you're thinking, you know, have I actually done that to this person? Yeah. And it kind of gives them an exit from the argument. Yeah. But again, it's that, you know, we can't also use those examples to brush over the fact that it is an actual thing. There are people who actually do it in relationships, in work, whatever it may be. So it's a difficult one to kind of, you know, suss out.
Right. Interesting. So 2024, new year, new you.
Yep.
What's on the menu then for you and for goal setting? Like, how do you help people? Do you help people? Do you talk to people in the framework of like, if I'm sitting down with you and it's New Year and I want to set up a new plan or I want to come up with a new thing, I'm lost, I'm looking for direction, what advice would you have for me?
So there are a few concepts or a few tools that I'd like to get into kind of as we go on through the conversation. But I think I hate using the word mission. You know, you hear that and a lot of people kind of roll their eyes and, you know, but it's, here comes another fellow with a mission.
Man, I think everyone should have a mission, to be honest.
Yeah. I think my pardon the pun, my ultimate goal in helping people set goals is, I think that, you know, without sounding too philosophical or without kind of going into the, you know, pie in the sky thinking, I think the world around us puts a lot of pressure on us from every angle, whether it be appearance, whether it be income, whether it be love life, whatever it may be. That, you know, especially the amount of time we're living on social media these days. I know, you know, we can get into social media if you want, but I think there's so much pressure on us to not to project an image of success in whatever category you're evaluating. And a lot of that as well is because of social media, we're put under pressure not just to pursue that success, but to project. So rather than actually going after it, it's how do I make people think that I'm living my best life and YOLO and hot girl summer and all that kind of stuff. When in actual fact, what you're projecting are the best examples of yourself when you're the one posting. But when you're reading, you could be in the worst position of your life. You don't have the actual facts of that person's life. So you could be looking at someone, you know, a girl's just put up a picture of her hand and she's got this massive rock on her finger. Oh my, you know, I'm single, or my partner didn't get me that same size ring, whatever it may be. You've no idea if her fiance had to go into massive debt to get the ring. You don't know if, you know, they had a sudden pregnancy and they've had to shotgun wed it. You don't know the facts. They could be blissfully happy and he's doing really well at work and he can afford the ring, or, you know, whatever the reason may be. So I think my ultimate goal is to try and get people to be happy in themselves before they step out the door. Because I think if you can be someone who is content in who you are and content in the tools that you have to deal with whatever comes up in your day, as far as I'm concerned, that's the foundation for anything. Whether you want to call it belief, self-confidence, all of these different things, I want to help people to get to a point where they say, ideally, whatever comes up in my day, I'll be able to handle it. But realistically, that whatever comes up in my day, I'll be able to function to, you know, whatever I'm satisfied, a level that I'm satisfied with.
So then, there's a bit of bits to take apart there, or to drill in on. How do you get people to the point where, like, what does satisfaction look like to you? Do you know?
So again, so this is very subjective, and from, you know, we won't get into the academia of it, but from an academic perspective, you know, the terminology is really difficult, because if I say to you, what do you consider happiness, it could be completely different to me.
Yeah.
If you're a parent, if you're single, if you have a job that is a passion, if you have a job that you hate, if you have a big family, if you've no family, whatever the context, happiness itself is really difficult to quantify because it's completely subjective. So I think a lot of the scales and a lot of the questionnaires from a psychological perspective that deal with satisfaction rather than happiness. Because I think it's easier to quantify whether you're satisfied with a component of your life than it is whether you're happy. Because we think of happiness, a lot of the time if I said think of someone who's happy, you know, it's a silly example, but it's that kind of dancing through a field of, you know, daffodils and, you know, having a picnic with the love of your life and all that kind of thing. That's difficult to quantify what you need to do to be able to get to that point in your life. But it's also difficult to quantify what does that actually mean. Is it spending time with the person you love? Is it being outside? Is it eating good food? Is it having the money to take regular holidays? Whatever it may be. So I think satisfaction is a better starting off point for people. It's easier to measure, and it's easier to figure out, are you satisfied with where you are right now based on all of the context around you? Okay.
So I have done exercises like this with the wheel of life.
That's one of the things I was going to bring up.
Yeah, where you have all of your little domains in a circle. Yeah. And you're trying to get from 0, which is the center, on a straight line towards 10 out of 10 satisfaction. Yeah. Where are you on that? And you go, gosh, well, you can't do satisfaction. It's all your satisfaction, isn't it? So you have to do it like family.
So satisfaction really is kind of a global thing. You can break it down into components. So for anyone listening who's not aware, if you think of it as like a pie chart or like a pizza, each slice of the pizza is a different component of your life. So it could be career, love life, family, free time, all of these, whatever. There are different components depending on the one you use. And so you fill that slice up between 0 being the lowest and 10 being the highest. And so it gives you a visual representation. It's a really good way to look at where right now do I think I'm happy, where am I satisfied, where am I content, or where am I really struggling, where do I need to focus? Because I think that's another thing that, 2024, new year, new me, all that kind of mentality. A lot of the time when people are in that, when you're in January, when you ask people what their goals are, a lot of the time it's the same thing. It's I want to lose weight, I want to be fitter, faster, I want to quit smoking, I want to drink less, I want to eat better. when really a lot of those things are kind of individual components or individual situational things. But really, if you think about it, if you want to eat better, but you're really, really unhappy with your physical appearance, do you want to eat better because you want to be healthier, or do you want to eat better because you're really unhappy with your self-image and your body confidence?
Or hot girl summer.
Or hot girl summer, yeah. So, and again, that ties into social media, where, you're looking at people who can edit their photos and edit their videos when they upload them. So, again, that's the thing, that a wheel of life is a really good step one thing to do. You can look it up online, fill out those things, and just give yourself an idea, because it's that can't see the wood for the trees thing, where sometimes it can be, I think I need to lose weight, I think I need to do this, whatever it might be. And then you look at it and you actually think, actually, the reason I'm overeating is because I'm really stressed at work, and it's, I'm working 14-hour days. I don't have time to cook really good meals. Sometimes the only boost I can get in a day is to just have the exact food that I want at that time.
I've done it a couple of times, the Wheel of Life thing. And I found the first time I did it, it was like, oh yeah, okay, I see it. There's a little map of how things are, and no surprise. I know how I'm doing over here, and not doing great over here, and doing all right over here. But where it became useful was I forgot about it and I left it, and I went about my couple of years, and then it might have been during COVID. Just there was so much downtime. You just you look back at things, you go whatever. So I took it out again, and I found the first one. I had it somewhere.
Great, yeah.
And then it became useful.
Yeah.
Because I found it, and I was like, all right, well, let me just do this again before I look at it. I was like, oh yeah, I found it, but let me do a fresh one. So then I looked at the two, and there was obviously some differences. Some were up, and some were down, and some were over. But what I did the second time, which I didn't do the first time, was I actually sort of explained in a note as to why each one was where it was.
Yeah, perfect.
Because when I look back at the first one, I was like, oh, that's there. I can't remember what was going on back then.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what have I done differently or whatever. But it was actually very more useful and more interesting as a snapshot in okay. If I had have even done it in more depth, where the first time it's like, there's your 7 out of 10, and just a little note, what's 7? 7, why not 10? Because this is not right. I don't think this is right, and I need to do more of this. So then when you go back to it in 6, 9, 12 months, whatever, you can say, oh yeah, I've fixed that. It's like the spinning plates. Now I'm spinning these plates. Oh, I'm not spinning that one over there, and that one, that's gone down. So that's where I found out was actually nice and useful, but I'll have to see if I can find it now, because it was I think it was during lockdown, and then the other one I did was way before that. So it'd be interesting as a comparison tool.
Yeah. And actually, that's it's a good visual representation, but that's actually kind of step 2 of it as a tool, is that the more specific you can be about where you are at that time, the better it will be, because. We'll get into this a little bit later, but one of the best goal setting tools is called SMARTer goals, right? So it's an acronym. It stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time specific, evaluation, and reward. So 2 of those things you've mentioned there. The first one being specific. The more specific you can be about why is it that this is because it's quite if I said to you, rate your satisfaction with how the gym is going right now. If you said a 7, you might say a 7 one day and an 8 the next day, and not really know why you've put 7 or 8. It's kind of, it's a little bit arbitrary whether you're going 7 or 8 really. But if you can specify, these are the things that I'm happy with that are going well right now. These are the things that we've planned that haven't happened yet. These are the things that we want to happen. These are the things that are holding us back. The more specific you can be, the better it is to kind of get into the weeds and figure out why that's the case. And then the E of the SMARTer is evaluation. That's a key part of any goal setting, any process change, any behavior change. You have to look back at what's happened, whether it be every 2 weeks, month, 6 months, whatever it is. Looking at something that you've done in the past, if you had written down where you were at that time, and then comparing your thoughts and your feelings at that time, evaluating where you were at that point compared to where you are now. Like you said, you can look at, are there areas I need to focus in more? Am I neglecting other parts? Or is it just that life has happened? Something like COVID, you can't control that. Has that just got in the way of the things I wanted to do?
And what are the other tools have you got?
So that would be the primary one. The other tools that I wanted to talk about, and it's part of what I want to do with clients or what I don't want to do with people in general is, like I said, I think there's a lot of focus on achievement and outcome of goals. So it's focusing on, I want to lose 5 pounds, or I want to get that promotion. It's what's called an end state goal, where you get up to a certain point, the thing happens, and then the goal is over. When in actuality, so losing 5 pounds is a really basic example. Like I said earlier, do you have issues with body confidence? Is it that you're eating poorly because you don't have the time to prepare, home cooked meals with organic food, anything like that? So what I'd like to get into a little bit more is a theory called self-concept. So we'll get into the tools of how you can kind of improve. So some of the tools I want to talk about are things to do with self-compassion and self-worth. There's also advanced goal analysis. But I think one of the tools that kind of comes on from the wheel of life is a thing called the stages of change. Have you heard of that before?
No.
Okay, so it's just a simple flow chart. It's 6 stages, and it's useful because it can kind of show you where you are at that point, where you are in the change process, the behavior change process. And so the first step is preconception. This is when you could be in denial, or you could be in ignorance that there is a problem whatsoever. You're not thinking about making a change. Step 2 is contemplation. It's where you're a bit ambivalent about it. You're not sure if you need to make a change, or there's kind of the inkling of the idea that you do need to make a change. And then so stage 3 would be preparation. This is when you're thinking about what you need to do. You're conscious that there's something that you'd like to change. You're doing your research, you're getting in touch with nutritionists or personal trainers, or just looking up videos on YouTube, whatever it might be, thinking about what it is you need to do. And where people go wrong a lot of the time with goal setting, with change behavior, is between stage 3 and 4, which is preparation and action. And the two main reasons, so action is obviously the stage where you're actually going to the gym, or you've started a better eating, whatever it may be. The two main reasons that people struggle to get from preparation to action is confidence and importance. So it's, do you consider this change to be important enough? And are you confident enough in yourself that you can make this change and you can sustain this change long term? So that's kind of the meat and veg of what I like to get into with clients, because if you're someone who's in a negative headspace, if you're struggling with your mental health, or if you're just struggling with self-belief, self-confidence, whatever it may be, setting yourself a goal can be motivational. It can be something to work towards. It can get you out of a slump. But if you're already in a place where you don't believe yourself capable of doing something, and then you fail to do it, you're not in a place to evaluate your failure. You're not at a place to not take it personally and think, okay, what did I do wrong? I can reset. What can I do better? You're thinking, it's what's called confirmation bias. You already believe, I'm not capable of this. Something happens, so it's piling down on the fact that I'm useless. I'm not capable of this. I'll never lose weight. I'll never quit cigarettes. I'll never give up drinking, whatever it may be. So that's where self-concept comes in. So self-concept is it's an overall evaluation of yourself. It involves every aspect of you. And the three things that there are 3 components of it, and this is where I'm interested in. So the 3 components of self-concept are self-esteem, self-image, and ideal image, or ideal self. Right? So if I said to you, a lot of people think self-confidence, self-esteem, self-concept, all of these are kind of interchangeable terms. So if I said to you, not to rate your self-esteem, but if I said, what are the things that impact your self-esteem? What would you say?
Competence.
Competence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what else. My self-esteem. Yeah, I would just say competence, and yeah, let's start with that, because I'm struggling to think of something else.
Yeah, no, competence is perfect. Competence is one of the aspects of self-esteem. Some other ones are self-acceptance, self-confidence falls into self-esteem, but there's also more abstract things. So there's things like a sense of belonging, feelings of competence, like you said. There's also security, whether that be in your job or in your position. It could be something like, we live in a country where you need a visa to live here, so there's always that constant stress of it. Things like boundaries. Do people respect your boundaries? Do they roll over your boundaries? Things like this. So what's interesting about self-esteem is a lot of it is external. A lot of it is dictated by the outside world. It's dictated by other people. So going back to that boss earlier on, it can impact your self-esteem if you say to your boss, if he says, I need you to do this, and my client says, that doesn't fall under my job description, I'm doing this project right now, and he just goes, forget that, I'm your boss, do what I tell you. You have said, this is what I'm being paid to do, this is my job, this is where the boundary is, and he's completely stomped all over it. That's going to impact you. That doesn't just finish as soon as you walk out the office door. You bring that home with you. That a lot of the time people internalize these kind of experiences. So
yeah, it's almost a point like he's not respecting my boundaries,
exactly.
Therefore I must not be worthwhile.
Exactly.
That level of
exactly.
respect. Yeah.
Right. So, and again, so a sense of belonging, if you're, again, one of these kind of pop psychology things, there was a study that, I'd say 80% of the podcasts and pages and influencers, all these people I follow, referenced in the past month or so, where it was a Harvard study of young people 18 to 25, and they found that the 3 biggest drivers of anxiety in people of that age were a lack of purpose or a lack of meaning, pressure to perform, and loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if we look at those things...
And that's a recent study.
That's a recent study.
Because what I... drilling in on those very simple but very broad words, what was that like 20 years ago? What was that like 40 years ago?
Exactly, yeah. And again, this, you can boil it down to social media. Another study that came out recently was, relating screen time to symptoms of anxiety.
Okay.
But what they actually found was if you actually boil it down to, it's not screen time, it's social media usage. That the more time you spend on social media, there is an increase in anxiety. Unfortunately, it seems that it impacts young girls the most. They seem to have suffered the worst. So if anyone's a parent of girls, it's really, really important to kind of research into this. No more so than anyone else, but it's just, to be more aware.
But I wonder what, did this study talk about how those 3, what did you say again? Self-esteem, loneliness, belonging?
So they were drivers of anxiety. It was loneliness, a lack of meaning or purpose, and pressure to achieve or perform.
So did they do a certain similar study and see it 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and see a difference?
I think there would be research going back. There will have been, like there will have been studies.
So the idea now is that it's higher now than it was before.
Yeah,
or it's not just it is high because of these things we think.
Well, I think it's one of those things where, the reality is that the world has become competitive. You can apply for a job on the other side of the world, and whether they provide the ticket or whether if you can afford to get there, if you can speak the language, whatever the parameters, you're now competing with everyone around the world. The world has become more competitive. The world's become more aware. So I think there are more pressures on people, and there are reducing opportunities. So even things like AI and automation, like the number of people who, I don't know if you, but like, did you ever work in a supermarket or do a job like that when you were a kid?
Yeah.
That opportunity is becoming less and less for people because there are automation, there are AI things that are coming in to do the basic skills that people will do to earn a few quid or to just have a job rather than being unemployed. So even thinking about those things where, like there was a story, I think a couple of years ago, where it was a Starbucks, I think it was in London, where they had 25,000 applications for like 8 barista positions. And they had people ranging from people who had finished school at 16 and had just gotten a job, and they had people with PhDs who were coming out of university with the highest qualification you can get and were applying for a barista position. So I think it is social media, but it's also the world that's happening because of technology, because of all these opportunities that are there. And then because of that, we're spending so much time online. We're spending so much time in online communities. Yeah. We're pulling back from physical communities. People drink less now. They realize the damage that alcohol can do to you. I don't know about your parents' generation. My parents would go to the pub. They would have, older people would go, and especially being Irish, people would go to the pub on a Friday afternoon. They would hang out, or people would go to the pub and watch a match and have a couple of pints. That's very expensive to do now. Yeah. People don't have the time. They don't have the energy. Social schemes in countries that, you don't really have that here in the same way. but funding for things like community centres, all of those are being reduced in Ireland and the UK. Just to talk about what I know about. So even the opportunity to be part of a community is getting more difficult. It's getting more expensive. It's more energy consuming. It's more time consuming. So we're retracting more and more from physical connection and physical communication. We're spending more time on social media, which has all of these negative impacts. And then we're in a world that is becoming more competitive and more difficult to find a foothold in. You talk about the housing crisis in Ireland. All of these markers are going up and up and up for inflation as well. That just to buy a spud is now more expensive than it was 10 or 15 years ago. So it's all these markers that you might not necessarily think are going into, are impacting your idea of yourself, but they're impacting you on a day-to-day basis. So then when it comes to goal setting and when it comes to motivation, if you have all of these worries and all of these concerns on a day-to-day basis, or if all of these things are impacting your self-image and how you see yourself and what you think you're capable of, that's going to have a huge impact on what you think is an important goal and whether you think you're confident enough in yourself to actually be able to achieve it.
So we did a quick whip around the other day asking a few people, when did you what age did you decide to do the thing you're currently doing? So, for example, Tomas is now a nutritionist, but he used to be a teacher. I think he was 25, 26 before he realized he wanted to make a change. And so from 18 to 25, he's an example of someone who would have scored low on the purpose. I'm not really doing what I feel I should be doing.
Do you know what he taught?
I think PE. I think something sporty. I don't know whether it was I don't know what. I think it was PE.
You find that, sorry to interrupt, but you find that a lot with teachers, particularly because a lot of them get into teaching because they were good at that subject at school. So they go into, so it's something that you're comfortable with. It's something that you find easy. And then suddenly you're 28 or you're 30 or you're 32 and you realize that you just went into something that you found easy. Now this is not across the board, but you find that with teachers or with people who do a job like that.
But that's not a bad thing though.
No, not at all.
That's like, you have a strength. Why are you good at that? Why are you good at maths? Because your neurology and stuff is good at numbers. You're good at remembering this and that and systematic and at it, whatever. I'm not good at maths, so I don't even know what you need to be good at it. But like, that's the pathway that they took. So how do you create a purpose then? Like, which bit of your young life do you try and tap into and double, triple, quadruple down on to go move into that skill or into that purpose when you get older? Like, my thing was just sports and activities and health and fitness and wellness and blah blah blah. So to a point I had no direction until I was a certain age, but also, as we had in the conversation, I wasn't in finance, I wasn't in agriculture, I wasn't in like maritime exploration, I was health and fitness. So even though I didn't know what I wanted to do, I actually sort of did, because I wasn't sitting in a finance lecture and doing accounting for my university. I was in some sporty thing. So like, I probably would have said, I don't know what I want to do with my life, but really stepping back, taking a big bird's eye view of it, I knew I was somewhere in the health and wellness domain, and then I imagine people's purpose changes. Like, you go one day, one couple of years you're aiming at this, then either you achieve it or you don't, or something changes, then you're aiming over there. You have family, that's your new purpose. So how do you help people dig out their purpose? Or because a sense of belonging must be the hardest one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think I think living in the UAE, I think pretty much everyone you encounter will have some kind of relationship with sense of belonging as an issue. They, like my wife is American, and she always says that like we moved over when I was 11. So if anyone's wondering why my accent is the way it is, it's because we moved all over the place. I have no accent. I have some weird generic. This
is you and your family, not you and your wife.
Me and my family, yeah. I haven't been married since I was 11. Yeah. Did I not tell you I'm Mormon?
Very good.
So she says that one of the things she finds fascinating about the UAE is Irish communities when they come out here. That that there's kind of a funny thing where people will move over and what they're looking for is a sense of community. They're looking for familiarity. it's funny sometimes because you get people who say, you know, they're breaking off into the big bad world and they're going to experience life, and then they end up in McGettigans every weekend enjoying in the Celts and, you know, playing football, whatever it may be. But, you know, I think that's what, you know.
So what did your wife find fascinating about that?
Just the strength of Irish people going to every corner of the world, and the first thing they'll do is look for an Irish pub. Yeah. Or the first thing, they'll move somewhere else and look for a GAA team to join. Because it eases that all of the uncertainty that come, you know, like one of the things that impacts self-esteem is security. Part of security is feeling like you're part of a community. It's different to sense of belonging, but if you have people that you feel comfortable with, people that you feel like you don't have to learn necessarily, they have all the same references, they have similar context, and it's also, you feel like you can rely on them. You know, the number of times I've heard someone say, which I will pull them up on if there's but you know, oh, go to him, he's a great guy, he's Irish. Yeah. I get why people say that, but being Irish doesn't make you a great person. It's just that you would prefer to deal with an Irish person than you would someone you're unfamiliar with.
So what would your wife have done? And like, which there just isn't a backbone, broadly spread American community around the world. So she doesn't have that option.
Well, so she didn't on her own of her own accord, but she did because she was working. She's a special needs teacher. She was working at a special needs center in Boston, who have a sister school in Abu Dhabi. So they had a program of transferring American staff to the school in Abu Dhabi. So although she didn't try to do that, that is in essence what actually happened naturally, because they were all put in housing together. They were all Americans together, so they all hung out together, watched the same shows, whatever it may be. So it did actually, funny enough, happen to her. But I think what she found interesting was that it happened to her just by way of the way her job was and her company was, but that communities of people will do that when they go, because she had never lived abroad also. I think moving abroad and living abroad is not unique, but it is very specific to Irish culture and Ireland as a nation. You know,
I would agree. That's sort of what I was thinking, is that like we have it in our blood that auntie and uncle and great granddad or great granduncle went across to the States in the 1800s or in the early 1940s or the 60s or whatever. So growing up in my family, there was always an aunt and uncle abroad. Always. There's multiple, more than one. So when it came to leaving, it's like this subliminal thing that's been there forever. And you know, Irish people are all around the world. You know that they built Boston, they built New York, they whatever. So they're all there waiting for you. So it's not that scary when you go. I know and when I went to Australia, the first thing I did was call up my mate's older brother who I knew was there. Right. He got me a job. So now I'm working with the guy. Do you know what I mean?
And it's like one of my best friends from school is living in Melbourne right now, and he said, like, it's funny how it kind of dipped down during COVID, but post-COVID, he said every fella in the gym is wearing a GAA jersey now. He said there are just GAA jerseys everywhere. There's O'Neill shorts everywhere in Australia. And
I would say that's more to do with the Irish traveling and moving.
I mean, not to get
rainy,
too
dreary, depressing Ireland.
And not to get too far into it, you know, there is an argument that, you know, the establishment has relied on emigration as an economic policy for, you know, low income people. Don't have to get into that, but I mean, it's just part of us as a community, I think.
So we got lucky then with our sense of belonging almost, because we can leapfrog in a place like Dubai.
And it provides that sense of security. So it's two things you don't necessarily.
So how do you do the purpose? Because this, I think, is an important thing. Because this helps people in their fitness realm, figuring out a purpose. What are they training for? But like, there's a deeper level of what are you just doing in life? And again, this is where things like self-acceptance and self-confidence can play a big role. So self-acceptance is an aspect of self-esteem. And I saw a video recently of, you know, one of these kind of business influencer kind of guys. His name's Alex Hormozy. Some good points, some things I wholeheartedly disagree with, but he was talking about this movement of self-acceptance and how he wholeheartedly rejects it, because his interpretation of it is that people are saying, I am good enough exactly as I am, and I don't need to change, you know, to be worthwhile, let's say. And I understand where he's coming from a business perspective, where, you know, there are certain, you know, you could argue that a lot of the time it isn't a meritocracy,
when it comes to business, when it comes to success, when it comes to life, there's a lot of nepotism, there's a lot of luck. Like you said, you know, you land in Australia, your mate gives you a job, could end up being a job that you're in for the next 25 years and you're massively successful. But at the same time, I think what self-acceptance, as far as my interpretation boils down to, is that you're not quantifying your worth or your value as a human being based on external measures. And I think that can play a huge part in your purpose and your meaning, because if you are saying, I am not a worthwhile, I don't deserve love and I don't deserve peace and happiness and success because I don't fit in the right size t-shirt, or because I don't have the right bank balance, or I don't drive the right car, again, that can tie into, if you are saying that I will be happy when I buy this car, when I get this promotion, when I get to this certain yearly income, there's no real end point, because you get to that point. If you're lucky, then you'll feel happy and you'll feel content in yourself when that happens. In reality, what normally happens is you get to that point and you realize it isn't what you were looking for. And now what was 60 grand a year is now 80 grand a year. And when you hit 80, if you're lucky, a lot of people are struggling to even get to 60 these days. Suddenly 60 becomes 80, and suddenly 80 becomes 100. And the 2-bed flat that you and your wife absolutely adore, or you and your partner, is suddenly now, a 3-bed semi-detached. And then suddenly it's a house with a garage and a massive garden and, 2 cars. So I think what I like to bring it back, if you focus, what I like to focus on is more building self-compassion and building self-worth. Because what I like to try and get across is this idea that you are worthy and you are valuable as a human being regardless of what your output or what your achievements are. If you then want to set goals that will optimize your life, that will improve your life experience, whatever it may be, that's fantastic. I can then help you set out those goals. But again, with purpose and meaning, and it might be the same with Tomas, where he went into something that he was good at and he found it easy. There was no challenge, especially once you get through those first 2-3 years that by all accounts in teaching is horrific. You get through that early bump and all of a sudden you hit a groove, you're in your rhythm, you know what you're doing, you know the curriculum, you've dealt with kids of different ages, you know how to handle them. Now there's no challenge. Now all it is you're doing something that you find easy. So if you look at yourself, take your training program, if you said I want to bench a certain amount and then you got to that thing and then you never pushed on from that point, if you were naturally a strong person and you set a level that didn't really challenge you, there's no point in going. You'd get to the point where you just say, why am I doing this anymore? What's the purpose in doing this if I'm not challenging or if I'm not getting anything out of this? So I think there are self-compassion exercises. There are things you can do. We can go through them if you want, but a lot of it is journaling and it's writing down statements. But it's really, if you can focus on self-awareness and self-understanding, what are the things that you like to do? What are the things that you want to do? What are the things that bring you joy and satisfaction and contentment? Like you said, as a parent, it could be, you come from a low-income background, your parents really struggle, they work multiple jobs, you didn't have a lot growing up. Your purpose may be, I want to get to a point where I earn enough where my children don't want anything. Or you could come from a background where your dad did really well, but he was always at work. So your purpose may be, I want to be there for my children, I want to support them, I want to be at home every day at 6 o'clock to have dinner with them, read them a story and tuck them in.
And then that becomes effectively the mission.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
So it brings us back to that word mission.
Yeah.
Which that's why earlier on when you said you don't like to use it, I would be saying use it. Like you need it. You need a mission statement, I think, because you need something to be able to, the self-talk. It's not just telling people what you want to do, because you're afraid to say my mission is, because you're afraid it's going to be rejected by whoever you're talking to, So you got to own it. You just got to push it and say, look, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm here for. But I do sort of reading in between what you're saying. I do also think it can change over time, and you can have multiple lines of purposes. You know, your family life, it's this. Your financial life, it's that. They do cross over, but how to get the balance and how to get how to take the steps to get there. That's the never-ending challenge, isn't it? Because you figure out a small path, and then the path the ground, the path is on in the future changes, and you gotta readapt. So where are you present on social media? Do you have a website?
Yeah. Got the unfortunately my previous Instagram was hacked, so I've just started a new one. So apologies for the fact that it's starting up again. It doesn't look great, but it's Richard O.M. Coaching on Instagram, and Richard O.M. Coaching at gmail.com as well.
Lovely. Okay, cool. Well,
so as I say, any of the tools I mentioned, any worksheets, if anyone wants to get in touch, not even necessarily for coaching, I'd love to speak to people about that, obviously, but any worksheets, any resources, anything like that, if people are interested by anything we've talked about, then give me a shout and I can point them in the right direction at the very least.
Yeah, beautiful. All right, well, thanks for coming in, and hopefully we'll catch up again sometime soon.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.